Radha Kumar wants to come in. Just give us a moment to fix that audio line with Yogendra Yadav and move that phone away. Radha Kumar.
Yogendra, from what I have seen, is that he led a midnight raid against women. He stopped their car. He had them put in a police van without police women. These are all breaking the law. And your party's defense has never addressed this issue of dreadful chauvinism against women.
Shiv Vishwanathan, aren't the questions to what Yogendra Yadav is asking aren't the answers fairly self-evident?
Let me put it this way. I think there's a party trying to hold itself together with different sections. I'm a bit disappointed with what I hear, because I would have required something stronger to Bharti, at least in terms of his behavior, in terms of language, in terms of attitude to women, and the whole question of how he himself looked at the problem. Because to a certain extent, he seems to think he is correct. That sense, there's a missing sensitivity there.
No, he thinks he's correct, and the party doesn't think he's wrong.
No, that's what I'm saying. A reprimand isn't enough.
No, he should be sacked for what he's done. And especially, there's a differential standard at play, Veer Sanghvi. When someone else levels a charge against an opponent of the Aam Aadmi Party, they jump in and immediately demand that he be sacked, if not hanged. If there's a charge against their own, suddenly the prism from which you decide whether action needs to be taken or not changes completely.
Well, I think on the many interesting things that Yogen said, there was one that struck me as being slightly comical when he said we had to examine whether it was appropriate for a minister to behave this way. Well, that's a bit rich coming from a party whose chief minister staged a dharna and destroyed all of central Delhi's traffic. Was it appropriate for a chief minister to behave that way? So their sense of appropriateness perhaps is slightly different from yours and mine. But on a more serious note, I think their basic problem is this, that if they take action against Somnath Bharti, they risk disappointing its constituents, people who said there's a prostitution racket, there's a drug racket, we are fed up with the corrupt police, we want a Batman-like figure, and the Aam Aadmi Party will provide it, who will go in and get these Africans out, get these drug peddlers out. You can argue that these are lumpen elements, you can argue that these are base sentiments, but hey, these are voters, and they're not going to lose them.
The other question which is very important is, what does Modi represent? And in that Kamal Mitra Chinoy, we're seeing the number of people who think he's a communal force come down from 18 to 7. The number of people who think he's a development icon go up from 24 to 30. Good governance 25 to 22. Hindu nationalism stays the same. The people who think that he is a communal force is actually come down to less than half. And that shows that regardless of what people like you might think, a large number of the respondents don't think of Modi as being communal.
Well, I think that after the 2002 riots, there was an SIT which was set up under a former CBI head, Raghavan, and though the amicus curiae had a different line in the Supreme Court, I think most people thought that since he'd been exonerated by the Raghavan committee, there was no point going ahead with this.
But that goes against what Yogendra Yadav and several others like him have been saying the longest time. There are two questions, Professor Yadav, that I want to...
I'm not saying my view.
I know that. But I'm saying that's the view that comes through from this sample. Because you would believe that Modi is guilty for the riots. You would believe that he needs to do much more to atone. But a lot of the people who've been polled seem to believe he doesn't need to say sorry. They don't think of him as being a communal force. Instead, the number of people who think of him as a development icon is actually going up.
Both see him as a Hindu nationalist.
Look, you're misrepresenting, but you're misrepresenting figures.
Let's hear from Yogendra Yadav. I'm coming to you in just a moment. Professor Yadav.
Rahul, I lost the signal for a bit, but I heard Radha Kumar and Shiv Vishwanathan, both of who I respect enormously, express disappointment at what we have done. And I understand, based on newspaper reports, this is exactly what one would do. But believe me, my colleagues have looked at hours and hours of footage, and not one, 3 cameras were present there that night. I have seen police women in the video, so how do I believe that there were no police women around? They are there, very much there. On other questions that you have asked about racialism, I have repeatedly asked in the last 3 or 4 days, please produce us one single footage, one sentence that shows racialism, because racialism is not only politically unacceptable, it is unconstitutional. And anything that spreads racial hatred is completely unacceptable. This is a zero tolerance question for us. We need some evidence. So I would actually, tomorrow we are releasing the entire footage for people to see. I would request Shiv and Radha and other intellectuals, publicly minded citizens, and I salute them for standing up to a minority which has no votes in India. I think we need organizations and intellectuals like this. All I would urge is, please look at the evidence, please visit that area, and then if citizens of this kind advise that we are wrong, we would certainly look at the matter again.
No, but I want to engage with you on the question of Modi and whether he needs to atone further for the riots. A lot of the people who are polled seem to believe that Modi now needn't say sorry. The number of people who think he needs to say sorry is actually coming down significantly. People no longer think of him as a communal force. Instead, they're thinking of him more and more as a force for economic development, Professor Yadav.
I looked at the data quickly. I think the proportion between those who want him to apologize and those who don't remains roughly the same. It's the proportion of don't knows which is going up. Still in this country, more people want him to apologize than not. And I think that indicates something very positive about political culture. The kind of questions we are asking about Somnath Bhartiya too, I think there's something very positive about our political culture, that we want people to apologize if they make mistakes. That is true of Mr. Modi as well. On my personal opinion, I have always said, I know it irks many people, that Mr. Modi stands in opposition to the very idea of India. The core principles that constitute the idea of India, Mr. Modi has violated them all. I do not know if an apology is enough, but yes, apology is something to begin with.
Sure, that's an opinion that you have, Smriti Irani. Clearly, a majority of the respondents no longer share Yogendra Yadav's view. Earlier, it was 51% who wanted him to apologize. That's now come down to 39. Clearly, bit by bit, Modi has been able to turn the tide. Smriti Irani, respond to Yogendra Yadav.
I think Yogendra Yadav will only embrace the people's verdict on issues if it suits his political ideology. I do not expect him to embrace the people's verdict if it is opposite to what he expects them to stand up for or speak about. I think what is extremely significant here is that Narendra Modi has emerged as an answer for good governance, has emerged as an icon of development. If Mr. Yogendra Yadav presumes that his idea of India, that every section, every Indian deserves the fruits of development, is not an idea of India that Yogendra Yadav prescribes to, then I think it's extremely unfortunate. I think Narendra Modi's idea of India means everybody grows together, everybody has equal rights, everybody should live with a sense of protection and under security and rule of law. If that is not the idea of India that Yogendra Yadav prescribes to, if Yogendra Yadav wants to support an anarchist movement, and in a democracy, that is his right and that is his opinion. I will only say this, that people who are uniting during Lok Sabha 2014, wanting to formulate a government at the center that will give them decisive leadership so that we can once again jumpstart the economy and go on to the path of development, are the people who are supporting Narendra Modi to be the Prime Minister of our country.
And Professor Yadav, yes, you want to first respond to what Smriti is saying, then I have another question for you.
Smriti, about the idea of India, I just meant three things. There are three core principles. One, democracy. Second, inclusive development. Three, diversity. It so happens that Mr. Modi stands in opposition to all the three. And believe me, these are not three personal preferences of mine. These are inscribed into the constitution of, these are inscribed into the constitution of India. And that is something which cannot be settled by any numbers or any opinion polls. On Mr. Modi's popularity, the simple thing is UPA and UPA leadership stand so discredited in the country today that people are being pushed to opt for the first substitute that they see. As and when they see an alternative, not a mere substitute, but an alternative, people will go for that.
Okay, Smriti, respond.
Allow me. UPA is so discredited, led by the Congress party, that Mr. Yogendra Yadav has absolutely no problems taking the same Congress party's support to formulate a government in Delhi. So a very government that his leader Arvind Kejriwal leads today. I think what is extremely unfortunate is that Mr. Yogendra Yadav wants to wish away the democratic right of every citizen of the state of Gujarat, which has elected Narendra Modi as the head of state, as a chief minister. What Mr. Yogendra Yadav, which is extremely unfortunate, seems to wish away is the decisive mandate that people are giving to Narendra Modi, even through surveys such as yours. So like I said in the beginning of my introduction with vis-a-vis Mr. Yadav's comments, that Mr. Yadav will only accept the people's verdict if it suits his own political agenda.